I do today. I was thinking about this recently, and I was thinking about like what has every bit of success come down to? Because at this point, like I have four really successful businesses under my belt. Um, and the sale of one that, was obviously very successful. And hey, Amber. Hey, Julie. Thank you guys for being here. Oh, thank you. This reminds me too. If you are here today, you are entered to win any one of our products. So basically, like you want the bundle, you want the mini course, whatever. If you have all of those, we'll give you a a gift card. But basically, just as a thank you for showing up and saying hi and being present with me and engaging. So anyway, any comment counts for that. Today we'll do any products. But all that to say, like when I look at all of the stuff I've done in business or the stuff that's created really big results, what I think is interesting and what I come back to a lot is how literally none of it made sense. Um, I'll walk you through that a little bit, but just to like give you the punchline and to not, keep it going. Hey, Marie Christine, first time. Thank you for being here. That makes me so happy. So like just to get to the punchline, because I always like to do that at the beginning. I don't like to, drag this out forever. The one thing it all comes down to is being brave. And I think that can, feel light and silly in a sense almost, but I also think our industry so rarely focuses on that, or if we do focus on it, the only place we're focusing on it is how much you should invest, because obviously it serves the person writing that content. But I feel like we're so often not talking about the bravery and risk tolerance it actually takes to create really big results. In fact, I think we're like, oh, it shouldn't feel hard. It shouldn't feel crunchy. Oh, except for investing. Like investing definitely is where it should, right? And I actually agree, investing often does feel scary and you need a level of bravery. But I just think it's so interesting in our space how we don't always talk about like there is a pretty significant level of bravery required, especially if you want big results, especially if you want like next level results. You almost always have to do stuff before you feel ready. You almost always have to be willing to double down and bet on yourself in a way that most other people won't. I think about that with entrepreneurship all the time. I think so many people come into this industry because they think it is somehow easier. I was actually talking to somebody about this recently, and she asked me, what do you think has made, which was a fantastic question. She asked me, like, what do you think has made your top clients most successful, and what about the people who were least successful? And what I said to her is that, I think so many people come into our industry, and if you come in because you think it's easier than something else, and you're like, oh, well, this is easier than that, you're almost always disappointed by that, right? You have to have this bigger draw and this bigger reason and this bigger why to deal with all the bullshit that comes from being an entrepreneur. Like, yeah, there's flexibility and there's benefit, and it's nice not to have a ceiling on your income, but like none of that is actually makes it easier to run your business day to day, to make these big decisions, to bet on yourself, to take big leaps. That is always harder than having a 9 to 5. Um, and I feel like we also don't say that enough. And so what I was saying to this person is like, when I see big results from people, it's because they don't think that this is the easy path, because they have a bigger thing that's drawing them to this path, right? They're like, yeah, I mean, I appreciate some of the freedom and some of the flexibility, but like, that's not the ultimate reason. They're not like, I'm picking this over this because it's easier. They're like, I'm picking this because I feel something on my heart that I cannot fucking let go of. So anyway, I derailed for a moment, but hey Michelle, good to see you. Amber said you have to have a heart-centered why, in my opinion. Otherwise, it's easier to give up when it gets hard. 100%. It's so much easier. And it's hard to be brave if you don't have another big reason. So again, back to that like bravery part. I think you have to make really brave decisions to make big results in business. So I'll just like share about a few of mine. But I think one of like to take it back to earlier in my business, one of the bravest ones was being like, I'm not going to do group anymore. I only want to do one-on-one. Like nobody thought that was a good idea, right? Objectively, it was not the smartest idea for my business, but it was most aligned to me. And I had to be brave enough to say that mattered more. And then even more than that, excuse me, was when I decided to introduce the partnership model. Again, no one around me was like, that's such a cool idea. Almost everyone around me was like, wait, what? You're going to tie your income to your client's income? Nothing about that makes sense. That's not a smart strategy. That's not a very good idea. That might create a little bit of like excitement and interest in the marketplace, but people actually might distrust you more. And you're like putting your whole business at risk. I mean, that was most of the feedback I got. I had to be brave enough to go, I'm going to do it my way anyway. I'm going to step up for this. This feels so much better in my body and my system. And so I'm going to go for that. And I don't think that that's always easy. I don't think that that's what this is like when we're hearing people be like, oh, it's about like ease or alignment. Like the missing quality of that is to get to ease and alignment, you have to be brave as shit to push against everything else that you think you're supposed to do or would be better to do or smarter to do or like insert whatever thing, right? You have to double down and bet on yourself so much. And I also think this is like what manifestation is, even in a sense, is like being brave enough to like decide you want the thing and then to show up like it's yours and act like that. And when we're looking for that to feel easy or simple, is when we're kind of missing part of the nuance. We're like, it does feel simple when you're like, I just want this and I'm going to show up for it. But it's not always that simple to stake that claim or to get your brain to get fully on board with that when you're getting feedback that is counter to that or opposite to that. And I really feel like if you can resource that strength and that bravery is when things get so much better. I truly feel like the narrative in our space of this is the easier choice, this is the easier path, and if you're doing it right, it should always feel easy is super hard. What I always talk about is like, I have ease in my business because I keep choosing to do it my way, which takes a significant amount of bravery. I have so many other examples of this that we'll talk through because I feel like I have so many stories I could share here. But I just always love to share that partnership one because I think now it's easy to see, right? It's like, oh, well, you made millions and millions of dollars off that. That was such a smart idea. Like, good for you. Obviously, it was so easy to follow that. Nothing about following that was easy. Again, no one thought it was a good idea. The only reason people all like try the partnership model now or think it's so cool is because now there's proven evidence that it can make you a lot of money, right? That did not exist when I was like, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm doubling down, at all. In fact, again, the opposite of that existed. A lot of people being like, that's never how you're going to grow. And so I think that you have to resource that in yourself and you have to expect that almost, or every point you hit where you're like, oh my gosh, I have to be so brave here. You're going to go, something must be wrong. Is something wrong with me? Am I making it too hard? Oh my gosh, I should be Like, should I just be listening to so and so more? Am I just like you're gonna internalize all of that instead of being like, no, I just need to be a brave bitch right now, you know? Hey Emma. I love Mondays now. It's become my church. Oh my God, that just made my day, Emma. That like makes me want to cry. Thank you. Bravery mixed with self-trust. Exactly. I think that's a very important distinction. Thank you, Marie Christine. I think that the foundation of bravery is self-trust, right? And I think it's also being brave enough to be like, and even if I got it wrong, it would still be okay. Like, that's what I kept telling myself about the partnership model. Like, even if I got it wrong, like, it's the worst that's going to happen. I'm still going to have a base rate. Like, it'll be okay. I'll figure it out, you know? Amber said I never fit in any one box. I had to learn how to trust myself and do shit my own way, 100%. And I think when you do that is when you have that big why that we were talking about earlier, like that's beyond like, oh, this seems easier than like working a corporate job. It's like, this is like me following my mission, my calling. I'm feeling pulled to this. This feels like such a big thing for me that I'm willing to be really uncomfortable for sometimes. Another example of this that I often think about on the flip side is like also being willing to be brave enough to walk away. So I had Happy Thoughts and Sarah and I stopped that. And then I had Dateable with Jen, and Jen and I sold that. With Dateable specifically, I will say, like, I think that was such a brave move. Again, like we don't always hear all the behind the scenes. I think it's easy to watch from the outside and be like, oh, cool, like she sold a business, right on, that's neat, or whatever, and like move on. But like from the backside, it is hard to make choices like that. It is really hard to be like, this business is good. This business is like doing well. I mean, we had so many really amazing affiliate partners and partnerships going on. We had a lot of opportunities on the table um, that we walked away from that not only probably would have given Dateable a lot more credibility and notoriety, but that quite frankly would have given me a lot more visibility, credibility, and notoriety too, just like through being associated with that. But the bravery to like do what was best for me and to decide that that can look however it looks. I think that in some sense, someone could be like, that's the coolest shit ever, like good for you for selling a business. And I think in another sense, somebody could look at that and go, oh, it must not have been doing that well if they were willing to sell it. Um, and I think you have to be so brave in entrepreneurship when you're making these choices to be like, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what everyone's going to think about it. They're going to make up whatever story fits their frame and narrative. What I care about is how it feels to me. And I was done holding two things. Like, I think that is one of the biggest lessons I've learned from that situation with the Happy Thoughts and Dateable is like, I always love the idea of partnership and doing something else. I get so excited about that. But in practice, holding two things, my brain is not as good at. Like it takes a lot for me. When I have something in front of me, I like to give so much of my energy and attention to it. I think that's probably why I'm a great mom of one. I think that's why I'm a great one-on-one coach. Like that is how I am. And so when I kept trying to like fraction off myself into pieces, I just think it always, though successful, didn't feel good in my body sometimes. And so I say all that to say, like, it takes a lot of bravery to start a second business, but it takes even more to step back from it because especially when you're like saying, oh, I'm a business coach and this is going great and whatever, like it could look a certain way. But if you're not always the one betting on yourself, no one else will. If you're not the one putting yourself first, making your needs matter, being brave enough to get what you want and go after what you want and show up for what you want, you will never fucking get it. And that is just the lesson I've been learning over and over again is like every time I am brave enough to say, no, 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 this is what I want, my life and my results get exponentially better. Every time I go, it would be better if I didn't. It gets harder. Michelle said it took me a long time to come to peace with the fact that my version of success looks very different from a lot of people. And I think it took me quite a while to untangle that from the online space. Totally. Right. And again, like, I think that's not always the story or the narrative we would use is that like that takes bravery, but that's what it takes, right? To be like, I'm brave enough not to buy into this bullshit or to even like maybe think they're right and still not give a shit enough to do it my way, right? Like that's what it takes. It is not simple and is not easy. And it is not about like this internal shift that you have to make always. Sometimes it's about being like, this is uncomfortable as fuck and I'm brave enough to do it anyway. Amber said that's why I only take a few clients at a time. I want to make sure that I'm giving my all to each and every client. Scaling might be more difficult in this way, but I'll figure it out. I'm not a coach, I'm a brand strategist. So it's done with you and done for you. Yeah, totally. Like, I think that makes sense. Like, sometimes we have to be like, there is something in me that says this is the right way, or that says this is how I'm made, or what my, like makeup is. And if I'm brave enough to follow that, the results almost always follow. If I'm not, it always will feel a little like I'm being performative or I'm playing a role or I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And that can get you results up to a certain point, don't get me wrong. And then also, I think sometimes we have to adjust expectations around that too. So it's like, this is just an example, but I wanted to, share some specific stories here. One thing that I did, I don't know if I ever shared this publicly or not. I honestly can't remember. Um, if you were around then in my world, let me know if you remember this. Um, let me see what y'all are saying. Sometimes it can be hard to meet all these voices around me and listen to my voice. Yeah. I mean, that is the ultimate work, right? Is like, it's easy to be brave when you can hear yourself. And it's harder when you're like, is this even for me? Right. Michelle said, I run multiple successful businesses in different areas, but because I didn't make a certain amount of money or didn't stay with it for X years, a little part of my brain wanted to make me wrong and erase the success that I did have. Yeah, totally. Right. And like, again, I think the bravery is being like, if anyone tries to make me feel wrong for that, like, I'm going to tell them what's up. I'm going to be like brave enough to like move on to the next thing if that's what feels best for me. Um, I what was I going to say? Oh, I don't remember if I shared this at the time, but I know I did with all my clients or a lot of my clients. There was a point in a lit up life, probably in 2018, 2019, where I felt like really solid with the partnership model. And I was probably making, gosh, I wish I could remember it. I was probably making around 500-ish at that time, I would guess. I'm really bad with like dates. If you guys are ever on these live streams, like what year something happened and what is attached to that year is incredibly difficult for my brain. Anyway, I remember saying to it probably was even before then, but I remember saying to my clients, like, I'm going all in on making $1 million a year. If you want to join me, let's go. And I had some people come into our Millionaire Makers Mastermind at that point, and I was like, this is it. I have not made this yet, but I'm making a mastermind for my clients at a certain level called Millionaire Makers, because that's what we're doing, and I'm doing it with you. And I remember feeling like how brave I had to be to claim that, because the idea that I even had control over that is kind of funny, given that my income rests on my clients. But I like made this bold ass statement of like, I am doing this. I'm going for this. Come with me if you want, but like, this is my goal. And I think it takes, again, so much bravery to be like, I want this and I don't have this yet. And I'm going to talk to people about it and I'm going to make statements about it. And I'm going to be open about that goal and that desire. And like, be okay with the fact, be brave enough that like it might not happen or it might take a while to happen or whatever. I think it probably took a couple of years, if not more, from when I told a lot of my clients that to when it like fully transpired. And but also that bravery of telling them is probably why it happened, right? Because I just got bold, I got unapologetic, I got clear, I got loud, and I started showing up with that action. The exact same thing happened with Dateable. Jen and I had this conversation where we were like, this is like, if we're going to sell, this would be the time to do it when we're at a peak, versus if we decide to step back and we want to sell a year from now and we've both taken really big steps back, like that doesn't make sense. So we kind of had this conversation. A couple people were kind of, coming to us kind of interested, and we're just like, we want it to be this, we want it to be this, we want it to be this, we want it to be this. We had all these things that we wanted it to be. And we were kind of like brave enough to be like saying this out loud and saying no to things that weren't that. And then the right thing showed up. And I really do feel like that claiming, that stating, that bravery to own it, to say it out loud, to make it known, to say, this is what I want and I feel unapologetic about it, is literally always the fucking thing. Michelle or Amber said that's brave as shit. And honesty and integrity to show that I'm not better than you, we'll do this together. It becomes a movement that way. Totally. Michelle says, I feel like this just goes to show you that sometimes you have to claim it even before it's real. Exactly. But it's not just about saying it. It's about creating action too. Like how you created $1 million mastermind, even though technically you weren't a $1 million coach yet. And so many people could have been like, well, I don't make that much, so who am I to run this mastermind? So powerful. Totally. Or some people would be like, I'm not going to claim, I'm going to just be quiet about the fact that I have it. And I was like, I remember like in the PDF where I invited people, I literally wrote this. I was like, let me be clear. I have not made this yet. I've helped clients make this, but I am on my way to making this. And I am deciding that, like, I literally said that in the invite. And I think that that's what was important about it. Um, and, same with literally everything else, like that clarity and that bravery to state it and want it and go after it is so big. And I feel like the gap is so vast in our space sometimes, because even like when we're kind of getting clear on the desire, sometimes I feel like we're not openly stating it, or we're like putting it on a vision board and we're kind of walking away from it, or we're like, yeah, I can say it to this person, but not that person, or whatever. And what I have learned so much in business is when I'm like, this is what's up, I'll tell everyone, like, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing, or like, this is how it's going to be, is when results come in, is when I really get what I want. And, you know, it's when I show up with that energy, it's like almost like I've put myself in that energy by stating it, by being brave enough. And then everything kind of picks up from there. Like I am being and acting in alignment with that versus waiting for the result to show. So I didn't have to be brave. It's like, let me have let me make the million and then I'll do the thing with my clients or whatever. Like, no, let me be brave enough to push myself that on that edge now, and then it will come faster. Amber said transparency is so important. Those are the folks I trust and want to work with and have in my circle. Yeah, integrity is a huge value of mine too. Couldn't agree more. And I think that bravery often is hard and scary. It's something I talk to my son about all the time, because he's like doing a lot of new things in his world right now. Like he's starting soccer, we're starting to learn to swim, and he'll be like, Mama, I'm scared. And I'll be like, that is okay, baby. You can be brave and scared at the same time. Like we can hold two feelings at once. And he's like, I see his little brain processing that, and then he'll story tell to me later about it, and he will be like, I was scared and I can be brave too, and then I was brave and I kicked the ball. And it's like, that's what I feel like we have to do in business. It's like, I was scared and I'm brave, and like we try so hard to push out the difficult pieces, the trade-offs we'll have to experience, the discomfort of what if it doesn't work out, what if I don't get the thing, what if I you know, like fall on my face? What if I say I'm going to make this and then I don't? What if I sell this business and everyone thinks it's because, I suck at business? Or like, we have to be willing to put those things on ourselves. Like we have to be willing to like say, I will take the hard parts that come with this to get what I want, right? Hey Lacey, yeah, he's so sweet. I love when our kiddos are able to tell us they're scared or proud or whatever the thing is. It's the best. We should put that on a shirt. I know, right? I feel like I need it on the like mug sitting on my desk. Like you can be brave and scared at the same time. But I think that this has ultimately like been the thing. I think in business, so often we think if I'm doing this right, it means I won't be scared. If I'm doing this right, it means it won't feel uncomfortable. If I'm doing this right, there's not risks or trade-offs that I'm accepting with this. And it, in my experience, it has always been the exact opposite. If I'm doing this right, I am accepting of the trade-offs. If I'm doing this right, I'm accepting that I'm probably going to be scared. If I'm doing this right, I am okay that I'm putting myself in a risky situation, like insert whatever that is. I don't mean like risky in like the ultimate sense, but like what feels like a risk. Like, oh my gosh, what if I say this and then I don't blank, right? If you do not get okay with that in business, your choices are this big, you know, like you can do this many things where you're not going to feel scared, and you're not going to have to put yourself out there, and you're not going to have to take a risk, and you're not going to have to be brave, and you're not going to have to feel discomfort, and you're not going to have to experience trade-offs. Like your world is this small, you know? And I think with everything I've done in business, even literally felt so scary to me the first season I did it. I had to be so brave for that, like to be like that I'm going to show my coaching. I have no idea how this client is going to do. have no idea how people are going to receive my coaching. I have no idea what criticism I'm going to get on that. There was so much risk, but it was the most aligned thing I could do. It was what I cared about most. It was what I felt excited about most. So again, I feel like now it's easy to look at literally 11 seasons in and see what it's done and how it's grown and be like, oh, that was obviously such a good idea. Like, how nice for you. And it's like, it was so not obviously that at the time. Again, just like the partnership model was so not obviously that at the time. Or even Sarah and I with Happy Thoughts, like our first Happy Thoughts show was me announcing my divorce. There was no evidence at the time that that was the best thing to do. Like sharing that openly and vulnerably was not really a thing in our space at that moment. It just felt right to me. So every single thing I've done in business has not seemed like the best idea, but something in me was like, this is what is for you. And I just was brave enough to go, okay. Seems uncomfortable. Guess we'll try it. I'm making that light, but I think it's the hard work. Nikki said, since you mentioned the partnership model, could you speak a little bit to if other coaches are allowed? I'm not sure what else to use your partnership model and mindset strategy framework with their own clients. I'm coaching brick and mortar business owners. Your framework is a thing that allowed me to step into bravery. Oh, so obviously I'm so sold on it, but I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Oh, I love that question. Thank you, Nikki. I would say if you're using MSE, mindset strategy execution, like you can just give me credit, like, credit to since I own the trademark for that. In terms of the partnership model, I don't care at all if anybody uses like revenue share. Technically, we have a like in process for the partnership model in terms of like the name. So most people that use it, I think, say something like revenue share model or da 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 da. If you want to call it partnership model, I think same is like credit for like the naming of that. Since we have a trademark on both of those, but I'm always for people being like, I have a revenue share business model and this is what that looks like. We just have always called it partnership model. But I definitely think people should go use it and, do that work. I think it's amazing. What else did I want to say about this? Trying to think of what other stories I wanted to share. I knew I wanted to share about literally. Oh, I know. That's kind of the point I wanted to make. I think it's really easy to look at someone at a certain point in business, whether it's me or someone much further along than me or whatever, and assume that every decision was easy and obvious and strategic and straightforward and all of these things and without trade-offs and blah, 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 right? I think it is just so easy to make that assumption. And what I really wanted to like highlight today is that almost nothing I have done that really took off in business made any sense at the time. I'm doing something later this year that I've like shared with my clients, and a few of them, I actually got a message from one of them this weekend. It was like, babe, can you tell me the strategy behind this? Because like, I love that you're doing this, but like my brain can't comprehend why you're doing this. Like, can you make it make sense for me? And basically what I told her is like, I kind of don't know either. Like, this is sort of why, but mostly it just feels really good to me. And like, when I sat with myself, it's what I felt like doing this year. So I'm just going to assume that it's going to work out and I'm going to be brave enough to do that. And so, but again, like we're always looking at things with other people from a different lens, like, oh gosh, if only I had like thought of a podcast like that at that time, it would have been so obvious. Like it wasn't, that was not an obvious choice. In fact, at that point, when literally was coming out, so many people were like, only do 20-minute podcast episodes, da, da, da. And I'm like, well, I guess I'm gonna triple that. I feel like obviously like most literally episodes are incredibly long. Slash, I'm gonna put myself out there. Same with like Happy Thoughts. Like it wasn't like the advice was like, go share all of your stuff in the same way that it is now, or go make it about you. It was almost the opposite. And Happy Thoughts just happened. Same with partnership models, same with anything else. Like, please don't look at me and think like I really had it all together. I think some of my clients do that. Like they'll come to me and they'll be like, yeah, but you've always been so strategic. And I'm like, not fucking really. I think I'm really good at listening to what feels good to me and then putting strategy around that, which is always what I say to my clients. Like, your job is to listen to you. Our job is to put strategy around that in our work. But like, I'm good at, like helping create the strategy around things, but I am rarely, if ever, which like to my own chagrin to a certain extent, rarely, if ever, going, this is the most strategic thing I could do right now. I'm just going to go do it. I'm typically going, something in me feels like this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I trust myself enough to like do it and put strategy around it. Obviously now it's objectively easier for me than it was the first time I did this with like the partnership model, or literally because I have so much of this evidence under my belt. But like it never looks that way from the beginning. And I would have to imagine for almost everyone I know, it's the same thing. Like it wasn't like they were like, oh, I'm doing this because I think that I'm guaranteeing this is going to make me $1 million in the next blah, 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 blah. They're like, feels like I should really do this, feeling really pulled to do this. Let's be strategic about it and go. And then it works out in ways you can't imagine. Like you said, I think you're ahead of your time, because the fact that I said I do revenue share is why my second client ended up working with me. I love that. How cool. Heck yeah, Nikki. That's so amazing. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to share this for perspective, because when I look back, I'm like, I'm not like, oh, I was so smart about that, or like, oh, I always filter it through this one strategic lens, or blah, 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 blah. Like the most of the time that it works out for me. And by the way, I'm a generator. So like being lit up is really important for me. So this might be like specific to other generators too, but like almost 100% of the time I've gotten a really big result on something in my business. It is because I was brave enough to go, this doesn't make the most sense right now. And yet this is what feels the best to me. This is where I'm lit up. This is what I'm excited about. This is what I feel like I can build so much interest and momentum behind, because I have so much interest and momentum there. And every time I've done something because I was supposed to that didn't have that, it's been okay. You know, like I don't know that I've ever had something in this business that like massively crashed and burned, I would say, but like anything that was lukewarm is almost always because of that. Um, is just the truth. Oh, manifesting generator. Yeah. So like that lit up is totally necessary there too. Hey, Shannon, listening to what feels good to me and putting strategy around it and ignoring fear equals genius. Not easy though. Agree. It is the work of a lifetime, right? Um, what are you working on in the season that you're feeling you're having to be brave is related, if you're willing to share it. Yeah, totally. I'm not going to share full specifics out just because of a reason, but I'm doing something later this year that I feel like is requiring some bravery of me right now, just in terms of like trusting myself to like show up for this, create an amazing experience, invest in that way, that kind of stuff. Another thing that I'm doing is um, uh, a friend has written a book, and I'm in the book, which is cool. And she wanted me to come to the book party. I'm again non-specific because I'll share more soon, but there's like an event, it's a whole thing. And initially, when I went to go, oh, I want to go to this book party. One, that's kind of stretchy for me as an introvert to be like, I'm gonna fly to this party where I like don't know anyone, besides like, a couple people maybe, and do this. And usually when I'm doing business stuff, Sarah is part of it. So I have my like security blanket, like that. And so that was a thing. And then also my husband was going to be away at the time. And so I had to be so brave to be like, one, I can do this. Two, I trust myself to show up for this. Three, I have to like really push to be like, hey, you're going to have to like rework all of this to make this possible for me. And I feel like even just that little of a thing, being brave enough to be like, this is fine. Like, I'm so fine with this stuff. Like, I don't even know why, like, make it up to be a thing in my head. And like, my husband will handle having to move his shit around. I move my shit around plenty. Like, just like little bravery moments like that too, I feel like are so big, because it's always easier to not like objectively, it would have been so much easier for me to be like, I'm just not going to go to the event. Like, I wish you the best. Da, da, da. It would have been, much easier. But the bravery of like, what if I put myself in that space? Like, what could come of that? is what I'm trying to lean into. Or like, what if I did this thing that's been on my heart and mind and like really stepped into that, even though like it's probably going to stretch me in a way that I'm like maybe not fully comfortable with right now. Yeah, Nikki, that too. So like this particular trip is like a whole thing. Like I don't think I've ever been away for been it for more than like a couple of days. Um, like when I've done stuff in the past, I'm like in and out. I'm like 2 nights max done. This one is longer. So even that, like being brave enough to be like, this is okay. Um, it's it's but it's always easier to not. Like it would be so much easier to be like, oh, I don't leave my baby for that long. My husband's already busy. Da, 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 da. And I actually did respond with that at first, just so we're clear. Like, I'm not saying I'm perfect. I actually did respond with that. And then I was like, oh, shut the fuck up. Stop. Get your shit together. But I certainly sent an email with that in mind. But that those micro things I feel like are just so valuable to prove to yourself that you're like willing and ready to do that. And that if it feels right to you, there's something on the other side of that for you. Love the following those things that light us up, even if they don't make sense. It always feels better, even if it's uncomfortable. Totally. And like the things that feel comfortable are rarely what is best for us. They're just what is comfortable. Like I think we sometimes get that confused. I know I get that confused in my body sometimes, the difference between comfort and true like lit upness. Like sometimes it is easier to feel like, oh, this must be right for me because it's comfortable. And we have to be so careful to have that discernment, you know? Wait till you see a little guy his age in the airport, you'll 1000% start crying. Oh my God, totally. It's gonna be rocky. But again, like I can handle it. I got this. But yeah, I do think like this is always what it takes. And also, by the way, I don't try to do this to myself all the time. There's like one really brave thing I'm doing this year. There was like the year I did the partnership model was like the only brave thing I did. Like the Dateable sales, the only brave thing I did last year. Like it is okay to not need this constantly too, because I think that's the other negative side to this coin is to feel like, well, that means you have to push yourself all the time, no matter what, in these huge, huge, huge ways. And I think people burn out their nervous systems with that too. So like, I also wanted to share that side of the coin is like, if I look at my business, I probably do like one brave thing a year. And that's enough for me. Like maybe some people have more capacity, maybe some people have less. That seems to be like what is like in my wheelhouse to handle. But if you're trying to do 17 brave things a year or one every 5 years, like there is going to be a difference there. If you're doing one every 5 years, your growth might be slower. If you're doing 17 in a year, you might burn yourself out. Like you have to figure out what that balance is for you. But again, for me, it does not look like all the time. Because that is when I would be burnt out. Like I have a decent amount of risk tolerance, but I'm definitely would not say I'm highest on that scale. And so trying to do that all the time, I just know would send me. And I would crash out and burn out and it would not be pretty for anyone. So just remember that part too. Like the takeaway from this is not like, okay, how can you go be brave in every way imaginable right now and do this and do that and do this and do that? Like, how do you resource yourself with the stability of what you already have so that you feel brave to do the one new thing or stretch in the one new way? Like that is, again, that doesn't have to be how everyone's done it, but that is how I've done it. It has really helped me. I keep this really strong foundation that I built over time and I feel resourced on a pretty, frequent day-to-day basis. And so when I do something bigger or stretchier or whatever, I have the capacity to pour into that. I feel stretched and uncomfortable, but I don't feel like I'm a band that's about to break. You know what I mean? And I think that that really, really, really matters. So like, yes, to bravery and doing it even when it doesn't make sense, et cetera, et cetera. And to balancing that with having foundations that support you so that you feel like you can be brave, but you don't feel like, you're bungee jumping without a cord either, like maybe it does feel like bungee jumping, but you also have a cord that you've checked a bunch of times and a bunch of safety gear in it. Like that's kind of, I think, like the vibe that we want to go for. At least for most of us, I think as women, like we need a certain amount of safety to be able to do that. And so I wanted to name that part as well, because yes, every decision or everything I've done that's created results came down to being brave, but it also came down to being resourced enough to like step into that bravery without breaking myself in the process. Such an important message that is honestly not talked about enough. Totally. Being an essentialist with bravery. I love that. I've not thought about it that way, but that is a perfect way to say it. Yes, it's like balancing your self-help books with fiction memoirs. Perfectly said. Exactly. Like you don't need to read like 100 self-help books a year. Like you're not even implementing at that point, right? You might read two and like really focus on those things, and then you might balance that with other things. I think that's perfectly said. But that's it for me. I mean, truly, like, again, I think it's just so easy to look at other people and think, oh, this always made sense, or it was always a good idea, or whatever. It has never been that for me. It has always looked like I have the resources to be brave enough to try this. And most of the time it has paid off really well when I have followed that as the guiding light. So I hope that helps. I am so grateful to you guys for being here and for listening to me go on and on about this today. Again, if you're here and you engage or comment, you're entered to win any of our products, or if you already have all of them, a gift card. And I just love spending Mondays with you guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. I hope you all have a beautiful week and a happy St. Patrick's Day. And I'll see you next week. Nikki, I looked it up last week because I remember I said to you last week, should I do this? I'm going to do it next week. I'm going to do a live stream about attachment styles in business, which I'm so excited about. I've been thinking about this so much lately. So we'll dive into that next week. It's going to be really good. And I'll see you guys then. All right. Bye, y'all.